So today I wanted to talk a little bit about what some people call the God complex. Because I think it's something that's really prevalent in this industry of coaching and training and all that. So it's the idea that you can sort of force things and dictate things. You know, this is the way that everything should be, sort of mentality. And it's really prevalent, certainly on social media platforms. Someone kind of throws this soundbite out there. This is what everybody should do, regardless of the way they're built, regardless of their training history, what their goals are, etc., etc. Totally ignoring all of the unique individual characteristics of that individual. And so they apply all these things to these ideas that they have, these blanket statements, to groups of athletes who have very different, characteristics. Just telling an entire group to do something a certain way, whether we're talking about a drill or a cue. And it's the more I see on social media, it's just gotten really out of control. It's a very collectivist idea that we should all be doing everything exactly in the same way. And I think that that's certainly not optimal at all. I think it's counterproductive, in fact. And so I would just say that we need to really think a little bit about this. It's irresponsible to apply so many things like that, so many blanket statements and sound bites to a large population of individuals who are, everybody's different, right? So, but I think a lot of it has to do with egotism in this industry. A lot of coaches want to, believe that they're the ones who have all the right answers. So it's a form of self-righteousness, is what it is. Coach always wants to be right, and they don't want to be blamed for anything that goes wrong. And so they always got to take this position of that they're always right. And the truth of the matter is, if you feel that way, then you have a serious God complex, because we have to acknowledge that we have limitations. As coaches, we don't know everything there is to know. That's just the bottom line. There's definitely things that we don't know and that we have to experiment with. We might have a sort of an idea, or we can estimate things. We can sort of predict or forecast certain things, but we don't have the answer for every single thing. We need to stop pretending like we do. At least if you want to get better results. But if you don't really care about the final result and you just want to look good, you just want to look smart, you want to pass the accountability off onto the athlete. Oh, you failed because of this. See, I got all the right answers, so it wasn't me, it was your fault. So we are seeing this happen a lot. It's so prevalent, especially if you read between the lines on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all these things. So it's just unfortunate that, I'm not saying social media in itself is bad, but the way that people use it, it certainly could be a lot more beneficial than it is. But the nature of things, it's often toxic and counterproductive. People just want to hear, part of the problem is that people do want to hear kind of like, okay, I want this easy answer. I want this one size fits all answer. I want a soundbite because it's easy. It's the path of least resistance. It's convenient to, just say, oh, use this on all your athletes and it'll get you all the results you need. That's, it's easy to kind of throw things out there like that. And it's easy for people to listen to that. You're telling them what they want to hear instead of what they maybe need to hear. So we need to get back to understanding that there's a lot of gray area in a lot of things. There's no straight shot answer for a lot of things. A lot of situations and circumstances you run into with athletes, it's going to take experimentation. It's going to take some guesswork. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know. But, you know, if you really want to get to the bottom of things, you have to engage yourself in that. You have to essentially, you know, sort of be a scientist in that sense that you are going to try to conduct some experiments in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't mean that, you know, you're constantly tied to the scientific method, but it just means that you have a scientific mentality, at least, of, okay, here's an idea that I have. I'm going to make an estimate of, okay, this is what I expect, you know, a hypothesis, essentially. And, you know, you experiment and then you see what happens. You look at the results and then you go from there. You build towards something better. But what a lot of these coaches are doing is they're skipping over that entire process. And they're saying, oh, the science says this and this is the one way. But they don't understand that science is a progressive field. You know, it's not like we have one straight answer for all time on everything. It's something that constantly needs chiseled away at. So constantly we're tinkering at different things and finding better ways to do things. So if you're not adopting that mindset and you're just saying this is what works and this doesn't work, then, you know, again, it's that complex of I am the all-seeing, all-knowing guru of everything. It's just unfortunate because the athletes are the ones who suffer because of this, because they're basically being, in a way, they're being predators. They're taking advantage of, they're preying on people who are maybe easily duped because, again, you're just telling them what they want to hear. Because, you know, there has to be some sort of, it's an uncomfortable feeling when you're dealing with the unknown. Let's just say that, you know. If you don't have an exact answer for something, that makes maybe you uncomfortable, and it certainly makes the person that you're telling that to more uncomfortable as well, right? It's like, oh, this person doesn't have all the answers. Well, you know, you have to sit down, take a breather, and explain things. You know, you have to have reasons for why, you know, you're going to try to experiment with something or try something different. And I think that so long as you're trying to get your way towards, you know, the truth, let's say, you know, you're trying to get to the bottom of something, I think that effort will be acknowledged by most sensible athletes. And you might deal with some people who are not very sensible, and maybe that just means that they're not very coachable. I mean, it's just the truth. So, you know, as long as you're striving to get to the right answers constantly, you know, trying to find better ways of doing things, I think if you communicate that in a healthy way, and you communicate that in the sense of, hey, we're in this together, you know, we're trying to both, you know, I'm trying to be a better coach, you're trying to be a better athlete. I'm not a perfect coach, you're not a perfect athlete, but let's strive to be better. Let's do this together, you know. I think if you can kind of instill that sense that they'll be more open to, you know, different ideas, and they'll understand that what you're trying to do, what you're trying to experiment with, is ultimately, you know, what's best, because you're trying to do better. You're not saying like, oh, this is the right way of doing things, because I'll tell you what, if you go in with that mindset, that mentality of, you know, this is the way of doing things, and, you know, this is the right way, this is the only way, and this is how it is, then what happens when it doesn't work out? What happens when the athlete gets injured? Or what happens when the athlete just doesn't have the performances that they should be having? Then they're going to lose their faith in you. They're going to lose their trust in you. You know, now if you go in with the idea that, hey, this seems like this might work, this is my reasoning behind it, this is why I want to try this is why we're going to do it this way, you know, if you give reasons and you explain, like, you know, this may work out, it may not, but here's why it might work out, then even if it doesn't work out, the athlete will at least understand, okay, this is why it didn't work out. And you'll both come to the understanding, like, okay, so we did it this way, didn't work out, let's try it another way. And so you'll both be on the same page versus, you know, this guy said this would work and it didn't. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right? So it's really important not to just go in acting like you have all the answers. I mean, it's the same way it works the other way around. If a coach has an athlete who thinks they know all the answers, then, you know, you already know you have a God complex type of person out there. They think that they're perfect and what they're doing, there's no room for improvement, nothing wrong with it. And it's going to be hard for that person to improve because of their mindset. I think this is a lot more common than people think. You know, I think you're going to find people like this everywhere you go. And it's unfortunate because it's really holding back a lot of people. And it's creating problems for them for a long time, for the rest of their life, you know. If they got injured or if they just didn't reach their potential athletically, you're affecting that person for the rest of their life, whether they're on a world-class professional level or not. Maybe they don't have professional level, let's say, talent potential, but you're still going to affect their self-esteem the rest of their life. So, you know, what's the point in trying to just validate yourself and say that I have all the answers? It's just not a healthy mindset. So, but yeah, we just have to come to an understanding that at the end of the day, you know, there certainly are some things that we are going to be capable of knowing, but we can't pretend that we're all knowing. And I guess that brings me up to sort of some other topics where talking about letting your athletes be athletes, letting your athletes find solutions. You know, sometimes coaches will be like, oh, this athlete, they don't have their knees high enough, or this athlete has too much butt kick, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But they're not considering, you know, well, why are they doing that? Maybe there's a good reason for it. Maybe there's not a good reason for it, but maybe there is a good reason for it. You know, maybe they're compensating for something anatomically. Maybe they have really long femurs or really long tibias or whatever the case may be. And maybe they're compensating for that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. People in the coaching, exercise, training world hear the word compensation, they think that's automatically bad. It's not always bad. You know, compensation is a healthy survival mechanism in a lot of senses. You know, now the reason why you're compensating, you may be able to do something about it, you may not. You can't do anything about your femur or tibia length, though. You can't do anything about the anatomy that you're born with. So let's stop acting that everybody should run the same exact way. It's just not true. I'm not saying that there aren't any similarities between, you know, good runners and runners who aren't so good. Of course, there's correlations, but there's not as much as a lot of people think. Again, each athlete is going to find their own solution, and compensation is sometimes the best thing that they could have. Look at a guy like Michael Johnson, for example. You know, he ran what a lot of people said, oh, he's very upright, which, you know, it's kind of an arbitrary term. It's very vague. It doesn't really exactly describe it. But he had a lot of anterior pelvic tilt, where his butt kind of poked back, his low back was kind of arched, you know, and that would cause also his upper body to sort of actually be like in a very, you know, position like this where it's upright, where he's almost leaning back a little bit to sort of compensate for, you know, some of the structures with his anatomy and everything. And a lot of people would say that, you know, he's not running like, you know, Carl Lewis does or like Maurice Green does or whatever. And if he ran that way, it would have been faster. At the time, before he ran world records, that is what people were saying about him. So, at any rate, the point is he had some compensation things going on with his technique. He looked a lot different than a lot of other runners. And, but it wasn't a bad thing, you know? So we have to stop labeling compensation as bad. So, yeah, there's just more than one way of doing things. And we have to stop trying to outsmart nature. That's the bottom line. A lot of coaches are trying to outsmart nature. They're trying to dictate how nature should work instead of allowing nature to express itself in the most optimal way and trying to work within that. So, yeah, aside from that, I would just say that it's important to also understand that as far as nature and how we're built and everything, being human beings or whatever the case may be to do with life, there's sort of we have to understand there's a self-organizing pattern within life. There's a self-assimilating pattern in life where things will put themselves together in order to find a way of accomplishing the goal in the best possible way when put in the right set of circumstances. So if you put an athlete in the proper position in terms of, I don't mean a mechanical position, but I mean put them in a situation at practice in their training to where they are expected or demanded to be able to, you know, accomplish a task. So put an athlete face down on the floor, just laying face down flat on the ground, and tell them, get up and sprint. You know, you might have 10 or 20 meters or whatever the case may be. But, you know, you have them do that. And oftentimes their angles that they come out at when they start, if you looked at it, you know, in slow motion or whatever, even in full speed, you'll be able to still see and notice these athletes will start to self-organize into proper acceleration angles and mechanics. So if you're laying flat on the ground, the athlete's they're gonna get their shin into an angled position. They are going to start lifting their torso up. They are going to, you know, position their legs in a way that they are going to have moment arms and levers and all that in a position where they're going to strike the ground in a way that's going to propel them forward. So you're just putting that athlete into a situation where they have to be able to organize their limbs in a way to accelerate down the track. And so if you're able to put them in that position, things are going to start looking pretty good, actually. Their body is going to orient itself towards a goal. So we have to understand that. And the situation and circumstances that you put them in is quite important, rather than doing it the other way around. Oh, we need to get in this position and then that's going to give us results. And oftentimes that position isn't how their body self-organizes. It's not what they're built for. You know, if you have a coach putting an athlete in a very specific block start position, but it's not really, it doesn't align with their specific anatomy, their specific strengths and weaknesses, if it doesn't align with those things, then you're putting the athlete in a compromised position. And so they're going to you're going to essentially be hindering them and holding them back from reaching their potential, because you put them in a block start position that's meant for Christian Coleman, or a block start position that's meant for somebody like Ben Johnson or, whoever else. And it's like, you're just going to hinder them just because you put them in a block start position like Ben Johnson. It doesn't mean they're going to run like Ben Johnson. So we have to stop trying to dictate and say this is how it should be. Again, God complex. So we need to start understanding what are we working with, who are we working with, and then gradually try to sculpt and form, their start position, for example, their, the other things that you're dealing with, upright position, whatever. That should be something, though, that forms itself, that assimilates itself, organizes itself, orients itself, over time. As the athlete trains, they get more fit, they get stronger, as they get more coordinated. All these types of things have to start coming together first before you can just say, like, this is the position you need to be in. There are prerequisites for a lot of things. You're putting an athlete, sometimes you see coaches putting an athlete in a position where they're in a very aggressive position. The shin angle is much lower than, let's say, 45 degrees or so. It's much lower than that. Their knee angle might be right at 90 degrees, and they might not be strong enough to handle that. They might not be built to ever handle 90 degrees in that angle. Their torso angle might be very bent, and it might not be able to be optimal for them to come out of a very bent position. Or maybe it's their torso angle might be too high, whatever. So you're trying to dictate what things should be instead of work with the power levels that you have now. Work with the strength levels where the athlete is currently at, and allow things to eventually, maybe they do get to the 90 degrees sort of, longest moment arm lever at some point in their career. Maybe that does happen, but it's not going to happen by just saying, like, forcing them into that position is not going to make them have the best possible start. You have to, again, put them in a situation where they're going to have to adapt. We want to stimulate adaptation. That's how improvement really stems from. You have to be able to put the athlete into a position where they have to adapt. And adaptation, you have to understand, isn't just like, oh, we're going to have one day where we just go in the blocks and we're going to make sure everybody has the same exact positions. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't make the rules. I'm not Mother Nature. I'm not the one who decides these things. This is just the reality of it. So we just have to be more open, honestly, and not be so closed-minded to think that we're going to be able to make someone a professional athlete by doing things that a professional would do. Doing things that a professional would do does not make you a professional, right? So, again, this is something, though, that kind of goes back to, it originates from coaches wanting to pass off the accountability onto the athlete instead of owning it themselves. It is telling people what they want to hear. It's trying to sell yourself in that way. And it might sound and look good at first, but at the end of the day, this is not how you're going to achieve long-term results. So, hope this helps. I'm not sure what I'll talk about again next time, but if you like kind of this type of topic, talking about development, talking about coaching and all that stuff, let me know. And I'll try to cover some topics that you might be interested in. So thanks for listening.